Over the years, I've read hundreds of accounts of the unexplained. This is the one I keep coming back to. My name is Raymond Tsosie. I grew up just outside Shiprock, on land my family has worked for 4 generations. My grandmother had rules. There were things you didn't bring inside, conversations you didn't have, and one specific word you never, ever said aloud. Naming a thing, she would say, gives it a direction to move toward. I left home when I was 22. Survey work for an oil company took me down endless dirt roads. It was a quiet life. My grandmother passed away the spring I turned 34. I drove back for the ceremony and left that same night, heading south on 491 toward Gallup. The windows were down. I was tired. Around mile marker 60, I saw something on the shoulder of the road. I slowed down, thinking maybe a horse had gotten loose. It wasn't a horse. It was standing upright, maybe 6.5 feet tall, or even more. Its torso was stretched, unnaturally long between the hips and shoulders, so its arms hung down way past where arms should end. The fingers were level with its knees. The head was wide and sort of flat-shaped, wider than it was tall, like something had been pressed down from above. It was standing at the shoulder, facing me, not even reacting to my headlights. I just sat there, my foot pressing the brake. Then I drove. I kept my eyes on the center line. I didn't look in the mirror. I tried to convince myself it was just a man. A very strangely built man standing on the highway in the middle of the night for no reason at all. 3 weeks went by. I was at a work dinner in Gallup. My coworker Denny casually dropped the word into conversation, asking if the legends were real. Without even thinking, I corrected his pronunciation. The second the word left my mouth, something in my chest just went still, the way the air gets heavy and silent right before a storm rolls over a mesa. That was a Tuesday. On Friday, around 2 in the morning, I was crossing the parking lot behind our hotel. One of the overhead lights was flickering on and off. The lot backed up to a concrete drainage corridor. And then something came around the far corner on all fours. Its haunches were too high, way above its shoulders. The whole body rocked from side to side with each step in a way no dog I've ever seen moves. Its coat was thin and patchy, the color of old ash. It stopped about 60 feet away from me, still rocking slightly, like it hadn't quite finished the motion of walking. Its head was turned toward me. I couldn't see any eyes. I scrambled into my car and drove to a gas station 2 miles away. I just sat there under the bright lights for 40 minutes, telling myself over and over, it was a coyote, it had mange, it was a trick of the light. The next morning, I called my uncle. He's a traditional man, still living out on the land. I described both things I'd seen, careful not to use the word. There was a long silence on the line. Then he asked, "Did you say it?" My silence was the only answer he needed. "Come home," he said. But the project moved us north to a ranch outside Billings, Montana. By October, it was cold. It got dark by 6. On my second night there, I woke up at 3 in the morning. There was no sound. I don't mean it was quiet. I mean it was the absence of sound, the kind that has weight to it, that puts pressure against your ears. My window was uncurtained. In the moonlight, something was crouching at the glass. It was close. The face was too symmetrical, too still. The skin looked dry and was pulled tight against the skull, like it had been stretched there from behind. It wasn't moving at all. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them again, the window was empty. At first light, I went outside. Right below the window, in the frost on the ground, 5 contact points were melted into the earth. They were hand-shaped, and wider than any hand I've ever seen. I booked a flight home that morning. On the highway to the Billings airport, about 20 minutes out, my headlights swept across a field to my right. Something was standing at the fence line. It was upright. Its head was rotated far past the point any normal neck would allow turned almost completely backward, so its face, tracked my car as I drove past while its body still faced the fence. I did not slow down. My uncle picked me up in Albuquerque. He listened to everything I told him. Then he said, "The ones that follow, they follow until they're satisfied or until you stop." I asked him what stop meant. He just looked down into his coffee. He said he didn't know exactly. I've been home for 4 months now. Last week at dusk, I was on my uncle's porch. I saw something in the gap between 2 juniper trees at the far edge of the property. It was too tall, and it was too still. My grandmother always said that naming a thing gives it a direction to move toward. But now, I think the direction was always here. Saying the word out loud just told it that I knew. There are more accounts like this one. Stick around. You'll want to hear them. Out of everything I've collected, this account is the one submitted persons asked me not to share. Ellen asked 3 times. I told her I'd change her name. I kept that promise. Ellen grew up in Farmington, New Mexico. Dine father, Anglo mother. Her father's mother was traditional, the kind of woman who didn't explain the rules, only expected them kept. Ellen became a long-haul truck driver at 26. I-40, east-west, New Mexico to California. She was good at it. 6 years on that run without incident. October. Night haul westbound. Somewhere between Gallup and Grants where the highway cuts between mesas and there S. Nothing either side but scrub and dark. No other traffic. Windows cracked for air. She noticed the smell before anything else. Heavy. Organic. The inside of something turned out. She told herself an animal had been hit somewhere near the road. Then her running lights caught the shape at the shoulder. It was moving alongside the truck, almost level with her door. On all fours but faster than anything should run. She was doing 64 miles an hour. The body was stretched horizontal, the spine long and curved like a comma, the haunches. Disproportionately heavy, driving forward in a gait that didn't gallop so much as unfold each stride, covering more distance than the animal's size should allow. The head was turned up toward her cab, and it was shaped like a human head, not an animal's. Human jaw, wide, no hair. The expression on the face, she was careful here, wanted me to understand she wasn't dramatizing, looked like concentration, like effort, like something working hard to keep pace. She accelerated to 78. It fell behind. She didn't see it again. She pulled over at the next truck stop and sat shaking in the cab for 20 minutes. She didn't tell anyone. She switched to day schedules, told dispatch it was personal. They didn't push. 3 months of daylight runs, and the gap between that night and her ordinary life got wide enough she almost believed she could step over it and keep going. Then she was at home in Gallup, asleep. She woke the way you wake when the room itself is wrong, not from a sound, but from the air changing. She lay still on her back looking at the ceiling. The window to her left was closed, curtained, but something was moving against the curtain from outside. Not wind. Deliberate pressure through the glass, slow, tracing upward, then across, then stopping. Like a hand reading the surface, looking for a way in. The room smelled the same as the highway. She called her grandmother that morning, her father's mother, the traditional one. The grandmother asked one question. Had Ellen said the word to anyone before or after the highway? Ellen had. A co-worker, the week before. He asked if the legends were real, and she'd been casual about it, used the word, gave context, didn't think anything of it. The grandmother said, "You opened a door." These things don't need much of an opening. Ellen asked how she closed it. Her grandmother was quiet a moment. Stop feeding it your attention. That means stop telling the story. Ellen understood. She said she did. Then she did the thing I still don't have an explanation for. She typed the account, sent it to me in a single message, and when I replied to ask a follow-up question, the email address no longer existed. I tried twice more over the next week. No reply, nothing. I don't know if she's okay. I think about that more than I probably should. I hope the silence she chose is working. I hope quiet is enough, but her grandmother's words stay with me. Stop feeding it your attention. Ellen stopped. What I couldn't figure out is whether stopping the story is what the thing requires, or whether it only seems that way because the ones who keep talking eventually stop for a different reason. I don't know. I'm still talking. Take a breath. If something in these accounts is sitting with you, tell me in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. Gerald Runningwater is 51. 12 years as a park ranger at Canyon de Chelly. Before that, Navy, 2 tours. He said the Navy didn't scare him, and neither did most things. He said this once so I'd understand the weight of what came after. It started with his dog. Soot was a cattle dog, 12 years old, gray around the muzzle, the kind of animal that had no fears left because she'd seen everything. Bears, lightning, tourists, rattlesnakes. Unimpressed by all of it. One morning in March, Gerald woke and she was under the bed, pressed into the far corner, shaking hard, not a shiver but a sustained, full body trembling that he said looked wrong in an old dog's body. Violent. He had to push the bed aside to get to her. By afternoon, she was fine. He put it down to a nightmare or something she'd heard in the dark. It happened again 4 nights later, and again 3 nights after that. He started listening. The 3rd night he heard it, not footsteps exactly. More like the sound of something large moving with deliberate softness, weight shifting, stopping, then appearing at a different point around the house without the intervening sounds of movement between positions. Like it was relocating rather than walking. Something circling the house in increments, pausing to listen after each one. Gerald got his flashlight and went to the door. He stood there with his hand on the knob for 3 minutes. Then he went back to bed and put his arm over the dog. He told me later, there are things in this world that looking at is a choice. He called his cousin, Dine, traditional, who drove out 2 days later, walked the property line, came inside and sat at the kitchen table with an expression Gerald described as careful, not afraid. Careful, the way you are with something that can go wrong fast. His cousin asked if Gerald had been talking about the old things lately. He had, 3 weeks before. A teacher had asked him to address a school group about traditional Dine belief, part of a curriculum unit on indigenous culture. Gerald had been generous with detail. He'd wanted the kids to understand these were living traditions, not museum pieces. He'd said the word. He'd used it several times for clarity and hadn't thought twice about it. His cousin said, "You gave it a lot to work with." They spent 2 days doing what his cousin said needed doing. Gerald didn't tell me what that involved. I didn't ask. What he told me was this. On the last night before his cousin left, he looked. Woke at 2 a.m. and went to the window. At the edge of the tree line, 40 yards from the house, a figure was standing upright. Human height, but the stance was wrong. Weight distributed oddly, knees very slightly bent inward. Arms held just away from the sides of the body at a slight angle, like someone imitating the posture of standing without having practiced it enough. The face was pale, not the pale of living skin. Lightless, the way old bone is lightless, dull in the moonlight where everything else had a sheen. And it was wearing something draped over the shoulders, an animal skin hanging down its back, stiff and rough-edged, too rigid, like it hadn't been treated. The head was perfectly still. Then it turned and walked into the trees, normally, like a person leaving a room. Gerald said that was almost the worst part. That walk, the ordinariness of it. His cousin left the next morning and told him Soot wouldn't have any more bad nights. She didn't. She died the following November at 13 peacefully, of nothing in particular. Gerald still lives on the property. He told me he leaves the outside light on now. Not from fear, he said, just habit. It's been a habit for 3 years. I believe the second part. There are more accounts like this one. Stay with me. I never should have posted that story online. You know how it is, you're scrolling. You see a prompt asking for your family's darkest secret, and you think, why not? It's anonymous. What could possibly happen? My family has this weird story, one my grandpa used to tell us. He said that generations ago, one of our ancestors made a pact with some kind of entity. In exchange for wealth and prosperity, one child from every generation would be marked, destined to live a life of solitude, never finding love or true companionship. It sounded like a folktale, something to scare the kids. The marked one was always a distant cousin we never saw, or someone from a branch of the family that had moved away. It was just a story. So I typed it all out and hit post. The comment got a lot of attention. Hundreds of replies, thousands of upvotes. People were fascinated, horrified, skeptical. Some shared similar legends from their own families. It was just internet chatter, and I forgot about it after a day or two. But then, the strange things started happening. It began with small stuff. A framed photo of my girlfriend and me fell off the wall and the glass shattered right over her face. I didn't think much of it, just bad luck. Then, she started acting distant. Our conversations became strained, and she always seemed to have an excuse not to see me. I tried to talk to her about it, but it was like speaking to a stranger. Within a month, she broke up with me, saying she just didn't feel it anymore. It was sudden and heartbreaking. I tried to move on, burying myself in work and hobbies. But the solitude started to feel heavy. My friends, people I'd known for years, began to drift away. Plans would get canceled at the last minute. Texts would go unanswered for days. When I did see them, there was an awkwardness that never used to be there, a strange distance in their eyes. It felt like I was becoming invisible, a ghost in my own life. It was a chilling, creeping loneliness that settled deep in my bones. I started to wonder if I was just depressed, if the breakup had sent me into a spiral. I even considered therapy. But the feeling wasn't just sadness. It was an unnerving sense of being fundamentally separate from everyone else. One night, unable to sleep, I was scrolling through old family photos on my computer. I came across a picture from a family reunion years ago. There, in the back, was my great uncle, the marked one of his generation. He was standing alone, a few feet away from everyone else, with this vacant, lonely look on his face that I was starting to see in my own reflection. A cold dread washed over me. I went back to that online forum, my heart pounding in my chest. I found my old comment and started reading the replies again. And that's when I saw it. A new reply posted just a week ago. It was from an account with no history, no other posts. All it said was, "You shouldn't have told." Now they know who to watch. I haven't slept properly since. I feel a constant presence, a cold spot in the room that follows me everywhere. The isolation is no longer just a feeling, it's a palpable force. It's like a wall of glass has been erected between me and the rest of the world. I see people laugh and connect, and I'm on the outside looking in, a spectator to the life I used to live. The story wasn't just a story, and by sharing it, I think I volunteered. I don't know what to do. I feel like I broke a rule I never knew existed, and now I'm living the consequences. So be careful what secrets you share online. You never know who or what might be listening. Thanks for watching. If you have any similar stories, I'd honestly be terrified but also interested to read them in the comments. Please subscribe for more. I still don't know what to do with the way this next account ends. Not the event itself, what comes after. What CV found when she went back and checked. She asked to be identified only by initials. She's a physician. Emergency medicine, Flagstaff, Arizona. 18 years in the field. She told me this upfront. The way people establish credibility before saying something they know sounds impossible. I need you to understand what kind of person I am. Because I need you to understand what it means that I'm telling you this. She grew up in Tuba City on the reservation. Both parents died. She went to school in Phoenix, then medical school in California, then residency, then 18 years of emergency medicine. She said she loved the traditional ways and had not engaged with them seriously in 2 decades. She thought of them the way she thought of many things from childhood, true in the context of that world, filed away from this one. You do that when you become a doctor. You learn to hold what can be measured. She works nights. A resident, Anglo, 28, smart kid who read everything, found her in the break room one November night and asked if the old accounts from the borderlands were real. He'd fallen down an internet rabbit hole. It was a slow shift. She was tired. She was honest. She explained the traditions, used the proper terminology, said the word when it came up naturally. She treated the whole thing as folklore, cultural heritage, interesting history. She went back to work and forgot about the conversation. A week later, 4 a.m., she was standing outside the ambulance bay, something she did most nights. Just 5 minutes of cold air, city sounds, stillness before the final push. Back against the building, looking across at the parking structure on the other side of the drive. 4 stories. Open roof level. She saw movement up there. Something was moving along the roofline. On 4 points. But the motion was wrong. It moved in starts, pausing between positions, as if calculating each movement before committing to it. The way a person moves when imitating something they've only watched and never done themselves. The body was large. Too large for a dog. The limbs were disproportionately long, the front legs slightly longer than the back, giving the whole silhouette a hunched pitch forward. And the head, this is where she slowed down in her account. The physician part of her trying to be exact, the head was moving independently of the body. Rotating. Scanning the lot below in slow, deliberate increments. Not the way an animal searches by scent and sound. Methodical. Room to room. Like something working through a grid. It hadn't found her yet. She went back inside. In the break room, she stood with her back against the wall and looked at her hands. They were cold. Not the kind of cold you get from a November night. The inside kind. She pulled the parking structure footage the next morning before her shift ended. The cameras on the roof level were functioning. She checked the timestamps, checked the resolution, verified the recording was continuous. Between 4 a.m. and 4:08 a.m., the roof showed nothing. Empty concrete under orange sodium light. Not even a bird. She sat with that footage for a long, quiet time. She told me, "I know exactly what I saw. Then, I also know what the footage shows." She holds both things. She has not spoken about traditional beliefs since then, not to patients, not to colleagues, not to her children when they ask about her heritage. She told me the night runs have become harder. Not impossible, just harder. I asked whether she thought it had found her that night, standing below in the ambulance bay while it scanned the lot from above. She thought about the question. Then she said, "The cameras showed the roof was empty, but the cameras only show the roof." I've been thinking about that sentence for 2 weeks. Where else it might have been. What else the cameras didn't show. There are more accounts like this one. Stay with me. All right, let's talk about the account I've been sitting on the longest. I almost didn't include this one. To be honest, I'm still not entirely sure that I should. I need to say something before we get into it. This is the story that made me stop everything and just sit in silence for a while before I could keep going. It's not the most dramatic or action-packed story you'll hear, but it's the one that felt the most personal. It's the one I still think about when I'm trying to fall asleep at night. Let me introduce you to Thomas. He's 43, a welder living in northwestern New Mexico, right near the Colorado border. He's been married for 17 years and has 3 daughters. He told me these things first, like they were the weight-bearing facts about his life, the details that make a person real, the things that make what comes next truly matter. In his family, like in many Dine families, there was a strict rule. You don't say the word. You don't describe what it refers to, and you certainly don't engage with the stories. His grandfather had been especially strict about this. You could see it in the way the old man carried himself, always careful after dark, always parking his truck so it faced the house, always aware of what might be lingering at the edges of things. He never explained why. He just lived by that rule. The grandfather passed away when Thomas was 36. It hit him hard. He'd been very close to the old man. At the reception after the funeral, Thomas, his youngest daughter, who was only 6 at the time, came up to him and asked what the word meant. A classmate had said it at school, and she was curious. He tried to just say, "It's nothing," but the words wouldn't come out. So, he decided to tell her the truth. Quietly, in a corner of the room while the rest of the family talked around them, he used the word. He described what it was. And he told her that she should never, ever say it herself. She just nodded very seriously. At that moment, he felt like he'd done the right thing. Explaining it felt better than just dismissing her curiosity. He truly believed that. About 2 weeks later, he was driving home from a job site at dusk. He was on a long, flat stretch of high desert highway. The light was fading, that specific hour before dark when distances become tricky to judge. That's when he saw something cross the road about 100 yards ahead of him. It was moving on 2 legs, and it was fast. It was bent forward, its arms swinging way too far back with each stride. The gait was so unbalanced, it looked like it should have pitched face down into the road, but it didn't. It moved from left to right, and before he could even finish braking, it was off the shoulder and gone. He just sat there in his truck, the engine ticking in the silence. Then he drove home. He didn't tell his wife. He told himself he must have imagined it. It had been a long drive, he was still grieving, and the light was bad. He almost convinced himself, but then his daughter stopped sleeping. It was 3 days before she told them why. When she finally did, she said she heard something outside her window at night, walking around the house. She said it sounded, and remember, she was 6, so she used the words she had like a person trying to walk like an animal. So Thomas started sitting up in the dark after everyone else went to bed. He kept the lights off, just listening. For 4 nights, there was nothing. On the 5th night, he heard it. At the far corner of the house, there was a slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the gravel that lined the foundation. Then, silence. And then, the exact same sound from the opposite corner of the house. It had covered 100 feet in no time at all. He went straight to his daughter's room and sat on the floor with his back against her bed, staying there until the morning light came in. At dawn, he walked the perimeter of the house. At the corner nearest her window, he found one single handprint in the gravel. He placed his own hand over it. His palm didn't even cover the impression left by the other palm. It had 5 fingers, each one pressing deep into the gravel, each extending nearly twice the length of his own. The knuckle marks were distinct. The angle of the hand suggested the thing had been crouching, its face very close to the wall of the house. He called his uncle that morning. His uncle listened to the whole story without interrupting. Then he said, "You taught her the word." Thomas explained that he told her never to use it. His uncle replied that it didn't matter. You planted it in a child. And these things, they're drawn to the ones who know and can't protect themselves yet. Over the last 2 months, things have been quieter. His daughter is sleeping through the night again. But just last week, she asked him a question he had no idea how to answer. She said, "Dad, if I see it again, what do I do?" Thomas told me he was still trying to figure that out. He said to me, "I should have just said nothing. I should have held her and changed the subject. My grandfather knew. He always knew." Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. I've shared this story with 2 people before you. Both of them asked me to stop before I finished. I didn't. You'll understand why when you get to the end. Delia Runningwater is 38 years old. She grew up near Kayenta, Arizona. Her father was a chapter house official for 30 years, a man people came to for guidance on traditional matters. He passed away when she was 29 from pancreatic cancer. She told me she grieved him properly, then moved to Phoenix for work and just got on with things. She's a middle school science teacher. She made a point of telling me that, just like another person once told me they were a physician. She wanted me to know the kind of critical mind she brings to information. 5 years after her father died, she was driving back to Phoenix on a Sunday night. She'd spent the weekend in Kayenta visiting her mother. It was about 9 in the evening on the I-17 southbound, a totally ordinary drive she'd made at least 40 times. To pass the time, she turned on a podcast something about regional folklore and history. And that's when they used the word. It wasn't in a harmful way. It was in an academic context, with careful framing. But there it was, said aloud. The host even said it twice more as he described the tradition for his audience. Delia didn't turn it off. She thought to herself, I'm an adult. I know what this is. She listened for another 10 minutes and then just switched to music. She didn't think about it again. That night, in her Phoenix apartment, she woke up at some point in the dark. She just lay there, not sure what had woken her. There was no sound in the apartment, nothing obviously wrong. Then she heard it. From outside her window on the 3rd floor, with no balcony, nothing to stand on, she heard breathing. It wasn't in the room with her. It was outside the glass. So close to the pane that, half asleep, she thought someone was standing with their mouth right up against the window. She lay perfectly still and just listened, telling herself it was traffic, or the couple upstairs, or the building's pipes, anything with a logical explanation. But the breathing didn't match the rhythm of traffic. It was measured, slow in, slow out, deliberately paced, like when someone is trying to be quiet but can't stop the basic rhythm of their own body. And between each breath, there was this quality to the silence that she described as occupied, like the air itself was being held by something just outside the glass. She did not go to the window. The next morning, she called her mother and mentioned the podcast, mentioned that she'd heard the word. Her mother went completely silent on the other end of the line. Your father told you never to let that word into your ears from a stranger's mouth. You knew that. Delia said she'd forgotten. Her mother was quiet again for a long moment. Then she said, he left you instructions. For this. You'll find them in the box with his papers. The small brown envelope. Delia drove all the way back up to Kayenta that weekend. She found the box. She found the envelope. Inside was a single folded page in her father's own handwriting instructions, very specific ones for this very specific situation. She read them, and she followed them. She wouldn't tell me what the instructions said. She was very clear about that. She said some things aren't for sharing, and the fact that she was sharing this much was already pushing her comfort zone. I only asked one question. Did it stop? She said the breathing outside her window stopped right after she followed the instructions. She hasn't heard it since. Then she said something that I keep coming back to. The part that stays with me isn't the breathing. It's that my father wrote those instructions down before he died. He wrote them for this exact situation. He knew this could happen. He prepared for it. She paused and added, he knew I'd forget the rule eventually. He knew me well enough to know, and that's exactly how she left it. A father who knew his daughter so well that he prepared, in writing, for the night she would let the wrong word into her ears. Who folded the instructions and put them in a box and trusted her mother to know when to mention it. I don't know what the instructions said, and I'm not sure I'd want to know. You're still here. I know you are, because you made it this far. And that says something about you, about the part of you that needed to hear these things said out loud, in the dark, by someone willing to say them. These accounts don't have endings, not real ones. The people in them went home, or they didn't. They stopped talking about it, or they sent me an email and then vanished. What stays is the pattern underneath it, all the word said once at a dinner table, the word typed into a forum at midnight, the word explained carefully to a 6-year-old who just wanted to understand. Something always hears, something always moves. And somewhere tonight, in a house you'll never know, in a field past a fence line you'll never drive past, something is standing very, very still, waiting to see if you say it again. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear more stories like this, make sure to subscribe.